Well, you know, Ian Ray, diabetes used to be or sound like one of those distant health challenges that happens to, some other people. But not anymore. Today, almost everyone knows someone living with diabetes. That's when you are not dealing with it yourself.
Well, that's quite true, Victor. It's now a global health concern. About 537 million adults between ages 20 and 79 are living with the condition worldwide.
And that number keeps climbing. If nothing changes, it could rise to 643 million by 2030 and nearly 783 million by 2045.
Sadly, low and middle income countries like Nigeria carry the biggest weight. More than 80% of all diabetes cases are found in countries like Nigeria.
True. And right here at home, the numbers are alarming. Roughly 11.4 million Nigerians are living with diabetes. Many don't even know they have it.
Exactly, and that's where the danger lies. Undiagnosed or poorly managed diabetes is claiming lives. At least 30,000 Nigerians die every year as a result of this.
Now, the Diabetes Association of Nigeria has even called on the federal government to declare a state of emergency on diabetes care, pointing to poor access to treatment, a shortage of trained professionals, and high costs of medication.
Did I hear you say Diabetes Association of Nigeria? People living with diabetes have an association?
Maybe not professionals.
Okay, well, that's why today, as the world marks World Diabetes Day 2025, the theme, Diabetes and Wellbeing, couldn't be more timely. It focuses on better prevention, access to affordable care, and support, especially in the workplace.
Now, the campaign also encourages open conversations, helping to reduce stigma and promote early testing because really, diabetes management begins with awareness.
Absolutely, Victor. And that's our focus today on Good Morning Nigeria. We're exploring the realities of living with diabetes, the latest research and treatment options, and what each of us can do to stay healthy.
We will also be speaking with experts who are leading the fight against diabetes here in Nigeria and beyond. I'm Victor. Also, thank you for joining us.
And I'm Henry John. I join Victor to welcome you to this special Friday edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. We're right here at our headquarters in Abuja, and of course, we would have the news super review, but that's much later when Chukwudi Okoli Ubaja. I just hope he's not creaking in the wrong places. Today is Friday. Usually a day to creak. Are you creaking in the wrong places?
No, I'm just okay.
Okay. Many thanks for remaining tuned. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. And just before we get into our conversation, which borders on diabetes and well-being, let's quickly take a look at this background report put together by our correspondent, Ekene Undulue.
Today is World Diabetes Day, observed globally each 14 November to shine spotlight on the fast-growing threat of diabetes and the imperative of holistic well-being. In Nigeria, this is far more than just a health campaign date. With millions affected, the country is grappling with a surge of chronic illness that touches physical health, mental resilience, and the social fabric. Nigeria's diabetes burden is real and rising. Recent figures suggest that no fewer than 11.2 million Nigerians are living with diabetes. For many Nigerians, the diagnosis triggers a cascade of physical complications. Blindness, kidney failure, and amputations are disturbingly common. Despite the urgent need, Nigeria's healthcare system faces serious constraints. The cost of managing diabetes has soared. Insulin vials and blood glucose monitoring strips are increasing beyond reach. At the same time, unhealthy lifestyle changes, sedentary behavior, processed foods and sugary drinks are feeding type 2 diabetes in younger populations. But there is hope. The well-being approach urges prevention, early diagnosis, and an environment where people living with diabetes are supported, not stigmatized. On this World Diabetes Day, healthcare experts now seated in our studio will speak to issues around living well with diabetes and support at the workplace, as this year's theme emphasizes.
Thank you very much, Chikene Ndulue, for that background report. And to begin our conversation on diabetes and wellness, let me welcome here in the studio Dr. Mansour Ramalan, consultant physician, endocrinologist, and diabetologist. He is also the first vice president of Diabetes Association of Nigeria and chairman, Non-Communicable Disease Committee, Nigerian Medical Association. Very much welcome to Nigeria, to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right, let me also welcome here in the studio Sarah Abagai, registered dietitian, author, and fellow of the Institute of Dietetics in Nigeria. We thank you very much for joining us yet again.
My pleasure to be here.
All right, still here with us for the conversation is Priye Ruth Igali, Manager, Diabetes Awareness and Care Project, Health, Strategy and Delivery Foundation. Many thanks for joining us, Priye.
All right, let's begin with a very basic, and I would like to get to Dr. Ramalan. For someone watching at home who may or may not have diabetes, who may have it and does not know that he or she has it, or one who has it and needs to learn to manage, what exactly does diabetes mean?
Thank you very much for a very good question, and I like the fact that you mentioned that somebody who has it or somebody who may not have it, because there is nobody in this world that is not affected directly or indirectly by diabetes. We all have relatives, friends, families, colleagues, siblings who are affected directly by diabetes, and that gives other people who are not affected directly to be affected indirectly by diabetes. Now, diabetes is a disease that is mainly because of the body's inability to efficiently utilize the food substances that are called glucose in the body, for the body to use it to function appropriately. And that inefficiency may be due to the fact that that person does not have sufficient insulin, or the insulin that is in his body is not efficient in providing him that amount of glucose that he needs for the body to function adequately, due to some problems like resistance. The body can resist the insulin, especially if somebody is fat. And there are some diseases that can even destroy the pancreas that produces this insulin. So generally, diabetes is a disease that is defined as starvation in the midst of plenty. You have enough energy, but your body cannot use it due to that problem that I mentioned.
All right, many thanks, Doctor. Maybe I will stay with you just for a bit. You've talked about what diabetes is. What are the symptoms? How does it present?
Well, that is another very difficult thing, because diabetes can present with symptoms that is common to a lot of other diseases. And that is the reason why sometimes it's difficult to just see somebody and say, this person has diabetes. But there are some symptoms that may be a bit peculiar to diabetes. They may, in the initial stage, look like every other person. But sometimes when the disease becomes a bit strong in somebody's body, you can start having things like increased thirst. Sometimes you see people having increased urination, and they may be eating more than ordinarily. And as the disease goes on, they tend to lose weight, because their body will assume that there is no enough energy, glucose, so the body will be metabolized. You know, the system will break down their own protein and fats to produce energy that is also not being used, so they tend to lose weight. Because the blood sugar is high, they tend to have problem with infections. They can easily get infections, be it some pneumonia, urinary tract infections, even some skin infections. They have boils and so on and so forth. And it's one disease that actually affects every organ in the body. There's no organ in the body that is not affected by diabetes. So sometimes they may just have problem with vision. They can't see well. They go to see their doctors, who will just check their sugar and say, oh, your sugar is high, you have diabetes. Sometimes they have problem with their teeth. They go to see the dentist and they said, oh, your teeth is infected. You probably have diabetes. They check your sugar. And sometimes they just have other problems like maybe infertility, and that is how the disease, sometimes may be diagnosed. So it's a bit difficult to say these are symptoms that when you say somebody has diabetes, and that's why we advocate for regular screening, especially people who are having some risk factors, which we know. For instance, every woman that is pregnant and she has some amount of weight, they go to antenatal, they will always screen them for diabetes. It's a normal thing they do for pregnant women, and it's routine. When people are overweight, they reach certain weights, we also always screen them. And for people who are above 30, 35, it's almost useful to regularly check, probably annually, because that's the way you can identify the disease. This disease can stay in somebody's body for more than 10 years, 15 years, sometimes before it is diagnosed, because the body will try to accommodate that high amount of glucose. And it becomes a problem when the body is unable to cope with the stress. And that's when, some of these symptoms appear.
You just made mention of certain things that I want to get cleared. Did you say infertility is related to diabetes? That's one. Then two, you said it can be in the body and not diagnosed. So even when you go for a check, you go for screening, is to still not be diagnosed? Is that possible?
Well, if you suspect, let me start from the second question. If we suspect that the blood sugar is high, they may challenge somebody with glucose. It's called a glucose tolerance test. They give you sugar, 75 grams, and then they check your sugar after several minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours. And they watch the body's response to that glucose challenge. So sometimes you just check the sugar randomly. You may not get the sugar to be high. So they give you this glucose to see how the body responds to food. So, and in those instances, if the diabetes is there, it will be identified. Another way they can do that is called a glycated hemoglobin test, and that's check your blood sugar control over 3 months, 6 months, and it's just a one test. So that can also tell you, because you can check somebody's fasting sugar and it's normal, but when they do the glycated hemoglobin, it may be high. Or when they give him the 75-gram glucose, they may identify the abnormality, and you'll be able to identify the person as having diabetes. And sometimes we have to combine the two tests to get the results. So actually, it can happen that somebody will have diabetes, but you may not be able to see it like that. In terms of infertility, diabetes is a cause of infertility both in males and females. And remember that it's a major cause of erectile dysfunction, actually. And it affects almost every organ, like I said. So it's a cause of infertility. And sometimes when people go for evaluation for infertility, they have to check their blood sugar levels. And we also want them to have good blood glucose levels. So even after the women get pregnant, if they have diabetes, we also ensure that the sugar level is normal, because it affects the babies. They may give birth to babies that are too big, and when they're about to deliver, they have complications of birth and what. And then the first few months of pregnancy, the sugar may be so high and can be toxic to the babies that it affects organs formation, so they can give birth to babies that are deformed. And sometimes if the sugar is very high, it increases their risk of miscarriages and whatever. So it's a very serious issue for them.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ramalan, for laying us a very solid foundation. We will get back to you. I'd like to, before I get to Madam Abagai, let me get to Ruth. You work with communities. In your work, what are those misconceptions that communities have about diabetes? What is it that they really do not understand, and why?
So thank you very much. And yes, so our project, our recently concluded project, we worked in 4 different states in Nigeria and worked very closely with the community. So this question is very, very interesting. So some of the conceptions we have, it really varies from what causes diabetes to how to actually prevent diabetes and, how to prevent diabetes. So one of the things I will say is a lot of people say diabetes is caused by sugar, which there is some, as the doctor had said, there is some reality to it, but that's not the entire picture. So some people will tell you, oh no, I don't eat any sugar, which means I will not develop diabetes, which of course we know is a misconception, as there are so many different factors that are involved.
Natural sugars
exactly, and natural sugars and carbohydrates as well. And of course, if you have non-modifiable risk factors, you're already at risk. If you're older, you're already at risk of developing family history. These are some of the factors. Another misconception that I think is very interesting is, well, I think debatable, but we have some local herbs that people will take that they'll say can cure their diabetes completely. And this is another very, famous preconception as well. Another one that's interesting, which, we all know that weight does increase your risk of developing diabetes, but a lot of people will tell you that, oh, no, I don't have any weight. That means I will not develop diabetes, which, again, is another misconception because you have people that may be within the normal range. Yes, who may still have diabetes, especially if they've got family history. So there's a whole bunch of different factors that, can increase your risk. And these are just some of the misconceptions that we hear at the community.
As part of the misconception, have you heard that if you say, for example, you had a very, let's say, dirty December, and that's what a lot of people can relate with, like you had a very dirty December, you had a lot to eat, you enjoyed yourself, can you detoxify? Some will tell you, well, I had sugar last week, so this week I'm going to be drinking. I mean, I don't want to mention, well, there are some substances that tell you they drink that, clears the sugar out. Does that work?
So what I will say is, so with diabetes, the major message is lifestyle modification. And when we say lifestyle modification, it's not just a 1-week detox that I'm going to do and it's going to cleanse my system. Of course, detoxes are good. We have studies that have shown that they may be effective for certain things. But when it comes to diabetes prevention, you want to ensure that you continue. It's a lifestyle. It's pretty much a change in lifestyle. So you want to reduce the amount of sweetened beverages you take, sugar, sweet, carbohydrates, you want to eat healthy foods, you want to exercise. A 1-week detox is not necessarily going to prevent your risk of developing diabetes. So absolutely, it's more continuous and everyday efforts that, would pretty much prevent that.
Maybe now that we are in this terrain, it's a good time to get to Sarah Bagai. And I'm wondering, what does a typically healthy Nigerian plate look like for those, intending to avoid diabetes? And of course, we should also look at things like tea and all of those.
Well, thank you very much. The typical healthy diet is a diet that comprises of, at least a component of whole grains, lots of vegetables. Because if you take my plate, for example, which we now work with, apart from the food guide pyramid, that shows you about 6 different food groups that will be contained in a diet for that diet to be, classified as healthy. My plate now is for you to have a standard service plate. And you divide that plate into 2 halves, 2 equal halves. And then the first half is filled with vegetables. Then you divide the second half into 2 again. And then you have your carbohydrate in 1/4 of that plate. And then you now have your protein and, your sauce, whatever it is, in the last quarter of the plate. So you see more fiber in the diet for anyone that wants to live healthy, not only a diabetic patient. And by the way, we don't really have a special diet for diabetes. So when people begin to tell you, oh, avoid carbohydrate because they say you have been diagnosed with diabetes, they're not helping matters, because everybody needs carbohydrate. You need that for your energy, you need that for your reasoning, because your brain uses a lot of glucose. So when you starve, the first signs that we see of, a plummeted, blood glucose is a kind of non-coordination, poor coordination in that person, confusion, and before the person goes into other crises. You understand? So the diet is essentially a healthy diet. We have nothing like a diabetic diet. And so that means that if a person is going to eat to be healthy, you still want to look at the food guide pyramid. At the tip of that pyramid is the sweets and the fats. Of course, for the person with diabetes, there will be an exception. Sugar, refined sugar is out of the question. You understand? Yes. But we need complex starches, whole grains in the diet. So what you have at the top that could benefit the person living with diabetes would be maybe just a little fat to add to the diet for palatability's sake and for whatever the body requires to use fat for. And then you now will look at the meat group. There has to be, an inclusion of meat. And in that meat group, meat could actually, beans could represent meat. Nuts, seeds like benny seeds and the rest, they could represent meat.
When you say nuts?
Yes. Like
specifics.
Almonds, cashew nuts.
Some say peanuts and so
peanuts very much in moderation. Because, peanuts, when you indulge, and what is happening in Nigeria is that we eat uncontrollably once it is peanuts. And peanuts become predictors, of triglycerides. Triglycerides actually endanger the heart. So that's why most times you find that the doctors will always keep tab on the lipid profile of a person living with diabetes. They want to find out, well, how is the good cholesterol, how is the bad cholesterol, how are the triglycerides, and all that for proper modification or control to, take care of, the organs, especially the heart, the blood vessels, and the risk for strokes eventually. So you bring in those. That is to help us, because sometimes when we plan a diet, and you plan the diet, say, okay, you have to have fruits, at least 3 servings of fruits a day. You want to have 1 banana, for example, for breakfast, with your breakfast. Have an orange, for lunch. Have an apple, for example, for dinner, part of your dinner. People look at it and you say, meat here, chicken here, fish here. They tell you, this is big man's diet.
Of course.
We cannot afford it. So we now tell them, look, on the list, the food guide pyramid, we have beans. But the problem we are having now is that people now get fixated on beans once they have diabetes. You'll find that they will eat beans porridge, in the morning. They're eating moi moi in the afternoon. And then in the evening, in fact, in the north here, I'm sure he will bear me witness. There is what they call tuonwake, the fufu of beans. But what we have tried to tell people is that if you want to eat healthy, please, you must eat a varied diet. You must have flexibility in food choices. You understand? Because if you get fixated on one food item, then you are actually losing or missing out on the nutrients that other varieties of foods should be contributing to your diet.
Many thanks, Madam Abagai. We'll definitely get back to you. But, that plate, your plate you were talking about that you give the different portions that should be in it. I'm wondering how many Nigerians can actually, get that. Doctor, I want to get back to you because she talked about moderation with carbohydrates. But for a truck pusher, for us sitting in the offices, I know we can moderate with carbohydrate. We don't get to use much energy. But for someone on the street, say pushing the truck or whatever, he'll tell you that the amount of carbohydrate is what gets him going because he needs a lot of energy. And some have also said that if you work so hard that you burn the starch or the sugar, then you're not at risk of diabetes. Help us explain that if it's true. That's one. Then is it about what's on your plate? Because so far we've talked about genetics. So is it possible for me to be eating healthy, or rather is it possible for someone to be eating healthy, but because there's a family history, you're still going to come down with diabetes?
Thank you very much. I like the fact that the little video clip we watched earlier actually summarizes some of those problems. People who do manual work in Nigeria tend to take a lot of processed drinks, energy drinks, carbonated drinks, and sometimes they believe that replaces the energy that they use. But it's actually not the case, because sometimes some of these processed drinks have a lot of calorie. In fact, if you take a bottle of carbonated drink, you can imagine some of them can contain about up to 25 grams of sugar. Yeah, it depends on what you are taking. When you look at the label, they always write, but we don't read it. It's mandatory for them to itemize the amount of calorie. So if somebody is engaging in physical activity, of course he will utilize a lot of energy, but the body will also produce. So if you are also taking, you are also expected to take commensurate to what you are taking. Now, when we talk about diabetes, it's primarily a disease of carbohydrate metabolism, primarily. However, it affects protein metabolism, it affects fat metabolism. Because when the body is in need of energy, the first source of energy is carbohydrate, which is safer and useful. Once the body does not have sufficient carbohydrate, it goes back to convert the protein in the body into carbohydrate. Now, the process of converting that protein to carbohydrate produces other substances that are not too good to the body. So that's why it's not the first line, it's actually the second line. And then the body also can now convert fats into carbohydrate. So that also is not too good. So for people who are using a lot of energy physical, they tend to believe that they require a lot of energy, and they take exotic and processed drinks and energy drinks. I'm sure they are
a lot of carbohydrate too.
Yes, and a lot of carbohydrate. Now the problem with that is that, like she mentioned, this energy composition is supposed to come in the form of a balance. And once that balance is distorted, it becomes deleterious not only to diabetes but to other aspects of the health. For instance, some of these energy drinks, what they do, they don't actually increase the energy in the body. They delay the metabolism of some of those energy because they have certain things that, that's what is called an enzyme that they inhibit, that is responsible for normal carbohydrate metabolism. So you think that you are taking in energy, but what you are doing is you are suspending your body's metabolic processes. And that's why after some time people get tired, because why? You wear off the energy that is in you by stopping or halting the normal process of metabolism. So it's not that they don't need the carbohydrate, they need it, but the proportion that is needed has to be balanced with other energy requirements like the protein and the fats and vegetables as well. And we have one type of cultural way of eating, in the sense that, like the dietitian mentioned, people tend to fix their mindset on certain food substances. And that's why when we are communicating these dietary habits to people, we are also very, very careful. Like, let me also say it here that there is some amount of sugar that is allowed for people who have diabetes. But we don't usually communicate to people, this is what, because sometimes people may misinterpret and say, the diabetologist said you can just go and take sugar. No, the quantity that you should take is important. Or sometimes, like my friend here was talking about, people talking about some herbs and vegetables. The dietitian will agree with me here that she has mentioned here that you need vegetables. So there's no harm in taking vegetables. But if you now convert your vegetables to say that they will cure your diabetes, that's a problem. They are useful in reducing your blood sugar. To what extent will they reduce your blood sugar to replace your medication is another question. So all these are things that we are dealing with carefully, and you don't want people to have the wrong message or to misinterpret the information.
What about the fact that your plate is healthy, but because there's a family history, you could still get diabetes? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's another very good question. But, you know, like I said, these things are interplay of several factors, which, again, we go back to the report that was presented. You saw he mentioned about people's lifestyle. He did mention about some of this. The lifestyle includes some of these processed drinks that we're taking, a sedentary way of living. We don't exercise like we used to be in the past. You see a lot of us is from work, office. Even within the office, people are confined within a small space, and they spend maybe the whole day within that space. By the time you go home, you rest for some few hours, you just go to bed. You eat and go to bed. So you didn't have time to metabolize whatever you have taken. And by the time you are eating at night and you are going to bed, your body will also be at rest. In the morning, you wake up and top it with breakfast. So yes, you keep your body with a lot of energy, and then you go to work and no physical activity. So you keep piling up. So that increases your risk. And genetic factors are there. There are so many of those types of diabetes that are genetically related. But when you look at all those things, you look at the factors that are within somebody's capacity to modify. They are called modifiable risk factors, like the lifestyle I'm talking about, like the eating habits. You know, then the other things that you cannot modify, like maybe your age, you can't change your age. You cannot change your genetic risk. But if you are able to modify these factors, you reduce your chances of developing the diabetes. There are many people who have all the risk for diabetes and they don't develop diabetes. And then the third thing is that sometimes some people can have small disturbance in glucose that is called pre-diabetes. Those are the patients that we want to get, because those are the patients that you can actually institute intensive measures to give them advice on lifestyle and the kind of food they should eat. And studies have shown that there are some medications that can be used in patients who have this pre-diabetes to delay their progression to diabetes, even prevent diabetes.
Just to delay?
Yeah, to delay or prevent. Yeah. And
is it reversible?
Very good questions. But I know studies have shown that with intensive calorie restriction, you can reverse diabetes. In fact, there's this study that came from the UK that people who were on diet, less than 800 kilocalories, it's really very low-calorie diet, actually had diabetes reversed. And they were followed up for some 2-3 years. Even after that, their diabetes was still in reversal. Secondly, patients who have had this surgery, weight reduction surgery, they call bariatric surgery, have also have diabetes in remission, not complete. Means that for a very long period of time, they were not taking medications. Some of them have forgotten that they've had diabetes. So what that means is that the quantity of food they are taking because of the surgery has reduced. So it's similar to what was obtained in this low-calorie diet study they call the DIRECT trial. And it's one of the ways that we can prevent diabetes.
What about in children?
Well, for children, there are so many issues. One is that, you know, I didn't take time to talk about the types of diabetes that we have. We have type 1 diabetes, which is mainly because of lack of insulin. In that instance, the body doesn't have the insulin that is enough to produce. And you know, insulin is like the key that opens the door for the glucose to enter into cells. So type 1 is much more commoner in younger children. And then we have type 2 diabetes, which is commoner in older people, usually above 35. And type 2 diabetes, those patients have sufficient insulin. But the problem is that the insulin is not efficient, whether because of insulin resistance or there's some defect in the insulin. And we have another type of diabetes that is just common in pregnant women. When they become pregnant, they have problem with diabetes. When they deliver, diabetes goes away because of some factors related to the female hormones. And then we have other types of diabetes that are from some medications that we use, like some of those steroids that we use in treating certain diseases, you know, like asthma and all those things. They can cause diabetes. We also have some genetic problems that can cause diabetes. So when you go back to children, you find that many of them, a majority, almost, you find 8 out of 10 will have type 1 diabetes. And type 1 is just because they don't have insulin. So for those children, they must take insulin, and they have to replace the insulin, and they are doing
what was responsible for that condition, in not having insulin at all?
So many things. One includes some viral infections in childhood. Some viruses can attack the organ that is responsible for producing insulin. That's the pancreas. And then there's what we call autoimmunity. Autoimmunity means your body produces certain substances that destroy the body. Autoimmune diseases include a lot of things like the diabetes itself, sometimes thyroid disease, sometimes arthritis. So that happens and is a defect that can happen. And then there are some genetic syndromes that can happen in children that can affect their ability to utilize glucose. For instance, this glucose that is being broken down, it follows a process, and there are a lot of enzymes that are responsible for different stages. So you can see somebody may have a genetic defect in one of the enzymes, maybe an enzyme that is supposed to break down the glucose. So once he has that genetic defect, the glucose will be there in the body, but the body cannot process it. It has to be processed for the cells to use it. So if it doesn't process it, it will be high in the blood, and then that is diabetes. But, science is improving now that there are so many mode of treatment now that are available to tackle some of those genetic defects. And then to also say for this type 1 diabetes, of course the insulin is a treatment, but I think recently now there are some molecular biology
from what you're saying,
yes,
what children eat cannot affect them, cannot cause diabetes for them, can it?
That's another very interesting thing, because now we have high prevalence of obesity in children. So we are now having a transition. We are having more children now having type 2 diabetes than before. In fact, one of our senior colleagues did a study here in Abuja, and she found almost 30% of these primary school children, being overweight and obese. This lifestyle that we are talking about, that we the adults have imbibed, we have now transformed that to our children. We are now giving them the kind of food that we didn't eat from our parents when we were younger. I'm sure many of us, the diet we ate when we were younger is not the same with what we are giving our children. Mm-hmm. And because we are now forcing them to take this high-dense processed food, processed these drinks, they are becoming more overweight. And because they are becoming more overweight, we are now having a transition from type 1 diabetes, predominantly in children, now to having type 2 diabetes in children. And so this is the sad reality of this transition. Whether it's due to urbanization or increase in earning capacity or whatever, it is a problem. So like you pointed out, it's something that we are also doing certain things at our own level about it. But I can tell you that it's a transition, and it's not a good one at all.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ramalan. Let me get back to Ruth. Why does it seem that many people don't, they manage to avoid testing for diabetes until complications appear? I'm asking because you get to work with communities and you see, those things. So why do you think it is the case?
It's a really great question. So I'll say it's different factors. There are multiple factors. The first thing I would say is, there's generally a lack of information, or I guess I'll say paucity of information, at the community level. So there's really a lot of work that has to be done on awareness. So when we started the project in 2018, we did a baseline survey to understand, the prevalence. Let's understand how many people actually know about diabetes. And it really varied. We had some communities where you would get about 30% of the sample population, only 30% rather, who actually have heard what diabetes is or even know anything about diabetes. Of course, we probed further, specific questions, but let me just say 30% generally who didn't have information or didn't know about it, and then, ranging to about 60%. But we didn't get any community where I would say everybody was really aware of it. So one of the things is, I would say, the lack of information. People don't know what diabetes is. They have misconceptions, just as we talked about before. Then the second layer is, there are people who might know about diabetes, but as Nigeria, we're a very religious society. And so we'll have a lot of cases where people will say, God forbid, it's not my portion. Why would I? No, please do. So, experience that in the communities quite a lot. So because of that, they don't even want to go to the facilities to test. So even where you have, access to free screening, it's like, no, please, I'm not interested. I don't want to know. There's definitely that aspect.
Even among enlightened people.
Yes, even among enlightened people. A lot of people, I remember being out in an outreach and, someone said to us, we did the test and, interestingly, he did come for the test. But after that, it was like, no, please, I don't have this diabetes. I'm just going to go home and pray. I don't have anything like that. My father did not have it. My mom did not have it. So, I don't have it. So we have situations, and these are some of the things that delay people from,
How much is the cost, for testing? That's one. Then I remember doctors speaking earlier and talked about different kinds of tests, and some could pick it, some may not. Mm-hmm. Have you had cases of misdiagnosis where someone who does regular medical checkup, but somehow, it was just not picked and probably progressed before it was discovered that the person had diabetes? Have you had such cases?
Okay, so I'll start with the first question. So I think the price for testing varies. Because now, thanks to the government, we have many of the primary healthcare facilities have been equipped with glucometers to do tests. Take fasting blood sugar. Basically the pH is at the community level. So in some of those cases, some of them, we even provide the testing for free. But even where they're charged, it may vary from about 200 naira, and then when you go to private facilities, you might have more expensive rates. But that's really, it ranges. But then we have things like HbA1c, which is, I guess, a more advanced test, which basically looks at the blood sugar values over a period of time. So those tests are a lot more expensive, and they're usually done at secondary healthcare facilities. However, just recently, through another project, I know they've also, technology is evolving. They now have point-of-care HbA1c tests, and, in some facilities you can also access for free. So I might not know the exact price, before we go to private facilities, but it really just varies. And then in terms of misdiagnosis, so I think the general guidelines, there's a national diabetes guideline, and I think what we do is you do fasting, I think 2 fasting blood glucose values, and this has to be done by a doctor or someone who has been trained, to actually diagnose and say you have diabetes. But it's also recommended to do the HbA1c test, because that really gives you a full profile of the person's blood sugar values. So of course there will be cases of misdiagnosis. I personally haven't had that through our project, because we predominantly do prevention and then we refer. And then, when they get referred to the secondary facility, they do the HbA1c and then they're followed up. Usually you're followed up after a 12-week period. So that, again, reduces the chances of misdiagnosis, because after that 12-week period, you reevaluate, you retest, and you see the sugar values. But of course, as with everything, you will have 1 or 2 cases of misdiagnosis, but it's really quite rare.
Why did you choose diabetes for the project?
Interesting. It's a very good question. In fact, I was speaking to someone yesterday and they asked. So I think so one thing I will say is that, as the world is revolving, we're moving from communicable diseases, not moving per se, but countries like Nigeria, we have a double burden of disease, where we have the communicable diseases that we're grappling with, but we also have non-communicable diseases. And we cannot neglect the fact that they're on the rise. You see a lot of studies, prevalence is expected to rise by this percent, that percent in Nigeria. So the project itself was a proactive, it was like a proactive lens to say that while we're doing because we have other projects that look at communicable diseases, we also need to start looking at non-communicable diseases. And, at that point, the entry point was diabetes. We did a couple of studies, we read through a lot of the literature, and we found that there was a really big gap in terms of the knowledge of diabetes. So that was what kind of stemmed, and that's, started the conversations. We also, at the time, this was 2018, looked at primary healthcare facilities. What are primary healthcare facilities doing on diabetes? Are they providing information? Are they screening? And we found that that wasn't really done. It really varied across the states that we looked at. And then the last thing I think that informed that decision was the the paucity of data. There was very little data. So the data we were getting were pockets of studies that have been done by researchers, but not necessarily a routine database that would say this is what the burden is, or this is what's give you a full picture of diabetes. So it was like, okay, let's see what's happening, and then we started the project. Then I think for me personally, why I was also interested in this was because in my family, we have a history of diabetes as well. Okay. So it just felt like, why not? From both sides of my parents. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Many thanks, Priya. Just to let our viewers know that they can be a part of this conversation by sending in their comments, questions, whatever it is as regards to this topic. We'll take them, and I'm sure our guest would respond, to them. The number is on the screen. You can send either SMS or WhatsApp messages. Thank you very much. I would like to get to Madam Abagai now. A lot of people will say that, Nigerian foods, they're basically heavy, right? You want to talk about pounded jam, you want to talk about whatever it is in Nigerian. So a lot of people just say, well, Nigerians, it's very impossible for you to eat light food. It's how we are brought up, and all of us just stick to it. But I would like you to speak about what a healthy diet is for a child. I'm particularly concerned about that because doctor just talked about a concern. From type 1, now we're having type 2. What is healthy for a child? Another issue is the fact that our kids are behaving like us, like they get into the car, get to school, get back into the car, get home, and then they go to bed. So in the past, you would walk from school, to your house and all of that. It helps you to exercise and all.
No, so you are living out the play. Kids play a lot. They won't tell you.
No, well, do they really play these days like we did? No, I'm thinking.
Phones in primary school, for instance, I don't think so.
For games.
They are living small spaces
and then
now.
even for people in their homes, they tell you they don't want their children to mingle with the neighbors, so they keep them indoors. In the past, you go to the street, play football, do whatever it is. But, just speak, what is healthy, really? How should we...
Well, that's why we started with the plate. I will still emphasize the plate, because it brings us to the culture of eating vegetables. These days, if you look at, before we get to the children, because the children learn from their parents, what you bring to the table is what the child recognizes as food. You understand? So if the culture in the house is to have a whole heap of rice on a plate, and you have the stew on top, and the pieces of meat on top, no vegetables, that is what your child...
Size.
Yes. That's what your child recognizes as food. But the reality is that the plate was, designed to bring us back to balanced nutrition. You were thinking about, the carbohydrate content of the food on the plate. As dietitians, we know that each food contains glucose at varied amounts, including the vegetables, including fruits. You understand? Even protein. At the end of the day, you get glucose from there. So you find that if you learn to eat a balanced diet, that is what you will enforce on your child. So these days, what is happening is that there is a very sharp departure from the normal local foods that we eat. People pick children from school and they go straight to the outlets, the fast food outlets, and they charter all these assorted,
burgers,
fast foods. Yes. And those are the things, there was a time we studied lunch boxes in a certain school, and it was terrible. All you would find there were just pastries, sugars, all manner of things, not a fruit, not even a carrot that should look attractive to a child to nibble on. There was nothing like that in most cases. And we went to the parents who were asking, why this? They said, look, we are too busy. When do I have time to start, you know, cooking in the morning and preparing and packing these things you are talking about? I have to go to work. If I don't earn money, how do I keep them in school? That is what we keep hearing. So something goes for something else. And what goes is the best part for the bad part. You know, so people just learn to get quick fixes for the children. But as we said, there is no really special thing about the diet for a child. The child must learn from childhood to eat the right food. And in eating the right food, you teach the child to eat vegetables. Generally, naturally, children don't like eating vegetables. But you become a role model at table as parents. Once you know your child sees mommy and daddy eating vegetables, he will eat vegetables. If he does not eat, try to coax the child to eat a little. Bring a child to begin to fall in love with vegetables in a garden. You understand? Take a child along, let's plant this. The children will be glad to eat what they planted, they harvested, personally. And it comes to the table, they say, oh, we did this, so we'll be able, pleasurably they eat. You take a child to shopping, don't take the child to the aisle where you have all the fast foods. Take the child to where he can see fruits, vegetables bought. I remember your colleague you were talking about, Professor Anuma. When she started the project with the secondary school children, what she did was actually to begin to introduce the fruits. You see them with apples instead of buns, instead of, donuts.
Apples are sweet, by the way.
Yes,
you like that?
Yes. Eat bananas, eat mangoes, and all that. So when we even say fill one half of your plate with vegetables, it's not expensive. It's not as expensive as you think. Because if I get a bunch of lettuce, I need only one tomato. I need just maybe a small slice of onions and one or two other things. I put it, before you know it, they are bulky. They just fill the place. And you get it. You learn to nibble on, natural food instead of these other ones. You have garden eggs that you can throw. Keep telling people, fill your fridge in the office with garden eggs, apples, and all these things, carrots, beautiful looking carrots that you can nibble on, instead of having, packet juices, having, full cream biscuits.
What about availability and affordability? People tend to talk a lot about being pocket friendly. When we were growing up, when we had balanced diet, we took balanced diet as a rich man's food. Silly us at the time. When you hear this person is eating balanced diet, you say this person is a big man. But today, how available? I mean, without repeating the same set of meals.
Wow.
If you talk about proteins, you talk about vegetables, without doing the same thing over and over. Of course, vegetables can be universal, they can go over and over. But beans is even have carbohydrates and protein. So how do we strike that balance if it is available and at a pocket-friendly rate?
You see, it is actually, your nutritious food does not have to be expensive. Dr. Ramalan can bear witness that in the north here, if you want to eat vegetables, you don't really have to go eating exotic vegetables. We have what we call kwado. What we do is
what's kwado?
Kwado, of vegetables. It's just local salad. And I'm sure in the East they also have it. Local salad. The local salad we have is that you could take your, lettuce, one tomato that I talked about. This is not expensive. Cut an onion, chop them, then pound your groundnut cake, kuli kuli. You don't need salad cream. Then you have it there. You would have eaten your vegetable serving. Very cheap.
And quantity?
Quantity? How do you mean quantity?
I mean, what quantity is good, what quantity is healthy, and what quantity is unhealthy?
As a snack or as a meal, by the way?
You could eat that as a snack. Okay. And you could add your vegetables into your diet. The last time I was here, I talked about farming, gardening. We still emphasize that. Sack farming is going on now, even on apartments, balconies, you understand. Get your pots. Flower pots are now, flowers are being replaced by vegetables. In pots, in sacks, in crates.
And they need the sun.
Yes, and they get them out there. So if something is too expensive to buy, you could plant it at home. If something is, easily, made abundant through gardening, like spinach, like our pumpkin leaf, ugu, we could do it at home. You don't, in fact, when you do, what I usually do in my home is that at the rainy season period, because we always have pumpkin leaves, what we do is we can't eat all as a family, so we keep sharing and sharing with people. So there are vegetables we must farm if we want to remain healthy. It may be, the other day, the consultant cardiologist was talking about how you could create a space in your home and, plant, fruit trees. You remember, these days it's not just about horticulture of flowers. It is horticulture of necessity, that we need fruits, we need vegetables, and we must devise a means to be able to put these things, within reach. If you are talking about the market, we also try as much as possible to tell people, do shopping from farmers markets. You understand? If you go to a farmer's market, they're just bringing these things in. They haven't gone to the middlemen. You can buy, buy vegetables that could last you. Some will finish in 3 days, some will finish in 1 week, still looking good. Like the cruciferous vegetables, they could stay for 1 week. That is cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower. These ones could stay in your refrigerator for 1 week. But the leafy ones will easily wilt.
You put it in the freezer.
So those ones, if you buy within a period of 3 days, you would have used them up. And they are cheap anyway. They are still cheap. Vegetables are still cheaper than buying meat. And many people spend more of their money sharing cow up to this moment. Buying crates of eggs, buying chickens in cartons and fish.
Is it wrong to eat beef?
No, it isn't wrong to eat beef. But what we are saying is for you to be able to strike a balance.
But I thought eggs were healthy. You just talked about eggs. I thought eggs were healthy.
Of course, we are not saying nothing that they are not healthy. What we are saying is that being able to budget intelligently. That rather than buying so much and stuffing your deep freezer with these things, and then when we now say vegetables, which are very cheap, you say, oh, where would I start? Vegetables are expensive, fruits are expensive, but tell me, the ones that you spent more money on, if there had been proper budgeting, vegetables won't suffer.
All right, many thanks, Madam Sarah. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll get to read the messages that we have. Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. And it's now time to look at some of the messages that we got from our viewers. The number is still on the screen, so feel free to send us messages. Our guests are still with us, and of course, they'll respond to the comments or questions, whatever they are. This one here says, I suffer from diabetes and currently I have numbness under my foot. Well, it says, can you help with the doctor's contact for further discussion? That's coming from Mike. Thank you very much. I'm sure you already have a doctor. But anyways, we'll see how we can assist you. This one says, please, what is the solution to low blood pressure and how can one manage it since it has no cure? Oh, well, we're talking about diabetes today. This one says, regarding society's intake of energy drinks, I discovered that unripe plantain, honey powder, ginger, and cinnamon can serve as alternatives to energy drinks. Let the doctor confirm or debunk the claim. All right, so says, good morning, how are you? You're doing a good job. Please, I have hyperthyroidism and the goiter is out and I have been using my drugs. My question is, with these drugs and injections, would the goiter disappear? And please, I want a doctor to talk more about it. Thank you very much. It says, does fast healing of wounds suggest no diabetes? Another one says, good morning, presenters and guests in the studio. My name is Dr. Hyacinth Temele, and I'm radiating. Are you radiating? Or rather, you're watching from Owerri, the Eastern Heartland. There is no gainsaying the fact that the prevalence of diabetes mellitus is on the increase in our communities. An indication of this is the incidence of diabetic foot ulcers, which the locals refer to as achaere in my dialect. My suggestion is that the federal and state governments can come up with policies to manage some of these locals free of charge. Currently, so many die from complications emanating from wrong management of these diabetic complications. Thank you, Dr. Ramalan, for your erudite presentation. All right, Victor. All right, maybe we should just respond.
Let me try to respond to most of them. And if I can remember some that I may not be able to remember, you can remind me. But let me start with low blood pressure. Surprisingly, for most people, I mean, with diabetes can predispose them to high blood pressure. But again, in some group of people, they may have low blood pressure. Because blood pressure control is under the what they call the nervous system. So diabetes can reset the nervous system in such a way that the patients now have that inability of their own nervous system to regulate that blood pressure. And for some, it can be so bad that they have what they call autonomic dysfunction, that in some instances we have to give drugs to keep that autonomic nervous system in place. In fact, our body has the ability to recognize when our blood sugar is going low. So that disturbance of the autonomic nervous system does not only affect the blood pressure, it can also affect your ability, the person who has diabetes, to even recognize that his sugar can be going low. So in those kind of patients, we actually advise them not to drive, not to do...
So is it the diabetes that's causing the high or low blood pressure? Or
it can cause both. Oh. It can cause both. In some people, most people actually, maybe up to 90%, is high blood pressure. But it can actually cause low blood pressure that is not even compatible with living well.
Okay, ripe plantain, honey powder, ginger and cinnamon energy drink.
It just reminds me of something that...
Equal to manpower. Let me put it in a way you will understand.
No. We shouldn't encourage people to think that there are certain food substances that will give them energy drink. The dietitian has spoken about it, and I'm sure that she made a very good presentation. This is what you need, and this is the combination you need, and then issue of proportion of what to take, so that cannot...
Can drugs make goiter disappear?
It's a very difficult one, but you know, there's what they call radioactive iodine. It's a radioactive substance that they give people that can make the goiter to disappear. But let me also say again that hyperthyroidism can cause diabetes. It's a cause of what they call secondary diabetes. So that goiter can cause diabetes. What they do is they alter the body's, they increase basal metabolism, and they alter the body's metabolism, and they can make the blood sugar to be very high. So sometimes patients with goiter can come with diabetes, and you have to treat the goiter, otherwise the diabetes will not go.
Diabetic food ulcers,
yes.
Can that be taken care of?
Yeah, and there are so many things. You know, the diabetes, like I said earlier, affects all organs. So they will affect blood vessels, they will affect the nerves that are going to the foot, they affect the skin on the foot. You know, the skin is moist with this sebaceous gland that produces moist substance. So when diabetes affects that nervous system components of that, the skin will become dry, and when it becomes dry, it becomes more exposed, and then easily it can tear, then infections can come in, and then the blood vessels that are supplying blood to that part of the foot can actually be damaged, it can be blocked because of diabetes. And this sugar that is high, bacteria will be feeding and flying in them, and it propagates infection. So it is a very good and non-recognized fact that diabetes predisposes to some of those diabetic food.
Finally, before Victor, you take that one, let me just take so that you just get to all the questions that you have. This one says, Dr. Ramalan, give us the types of insulin and methods of administration for treatment of type 1 diabetes. I also want to know if the federal government is doing something about the rising cost of injectable insulin. I spend 14,000 naira weekly on one vial of Mr. insulin.
Well, I know somebody has asked for my contact. I think you can share with them, because as part of what we do in Diabetes Association of Nigeria, so we try as much as possible to reach out to the patients. And patients are, I mean, everybody is part of diabetes. It's not for professionals only. We have dietitians, and I think you were part of the program. Last year, we didn't meet physically, but so everybody is part of it. So we are glad and happy to contribute and support. And I think spending 14,000 is even a bit conservative.
Compared to some other things.
Yeah, it could be more than that. Could be more than that. And this program may not be sufficient for us to discuss all the types of insulin, but we have insulin that are called short-acting. They just take them just before meals. And we have long-acting insulin. You can take that once in a day. And they have to get, for type 1, we advocate that they use the 2 types of insulin, because we have what is called, when you eat, the body produces some amount of insulin that is just commensurate to metabolize what you eat. But for all of us that are sitting here, we've not eaten, and your blood glucose has to be maintained in a certain range. So the body secretes certain quantity of insulin slowly to keep our own blood sugar as we are to a range of about 4 to 6 millimole per liter. So that is what that long-acting insulin will give you to replace that basal insulin secretion. But when you now decide to eat a bowl of rice, your body will produce large amount of insulin to metabolize that rice you are taking. So that you have to replace by what they call boluses. That's the short-acting insulin. So, I mean, they can reach out to us. We will be glad to help give them all the information they need. Actually, it's the responsibility of the Diabetes Association to do that.
So, some of the questions here I think have been dealt with anyway, but I'll read them nonetheless. This one reads, can diabetes cause stomach problem? It didn't state what kind of problem, no name too. And this other one, good morning, NTA. I always enjoy your conversation. Why is diabetes hereditary? Okay. And from Dr. Elijah Aderibigbe, good morning, Nigeria. What type of food shouldn't be eaten or avoided, and what to eat in order to avoid being diabetic as precautions? Like I said, some of them we had dealt with. What are the major signs of diabetes? We had dealt with. Good morning to you all. Please, what kind of food should I give to my kids? Please, I need to know. And then, good morning. My name is Olade Abiodun from Lagos. Please, if someone has high level of sugar, what are the foods and fruits he or she is supposed to eat and not eat? And finally, please, do you consider our rural people who are from poor families living in rented houses with limited space for family? Can you please consider them and suggest how they eat their eba, tuwo with me and kuka, etc., cocoa and kose? Basically, the rural foods are mainly from the grains they cultivated. So please come down to their levels and advise them accordingly. Some only get to eat protein at Salah or Christmas. Perhaps we'll start with you with that, Madam Abaka.
Well, you see, what we have always said is that a balanced or a nutritive diet is not not necessarily expensive.
Not necessarily.
Yes. If we are looking for fiber, we are looking for diverse types of fiber in the diet. And that's why we always talk about, the tuwo being made from unrefined grains, whole grains. These days we now...
and blend.
Yes, just
measure
clean and then let it just be, immediately, ground, not processed. Because people now remove the bran, which they call chaff, and they throw away. And it is actually very, very important in the control of blood glucose as it trickles into, the blood and all that. So we have now been emphasizing the issue of, not processing our grains, even for pap. We kept on telling people that the pap that you grind, you come and start filtering and throwing away, the fiber, is for children, for infants, because they are tender, stomachs cannot digest complex starches. But for adults, nothing should be wasted.
What about the sand and stones? How do you take that out?
How do you do that?
As in, if you make pap and then you just blend and then you start making the pap, I don't know, stones.
It's so tasty.
Tasty
Whole
stone.
grain pap is tastier than the baby pap. You understand? It is wholesome nutrition there. And of course, you also find that it is filling. It will sustain the person for a while because of the fiber content. And that's why most times when you give children pap, they will tell you, I will soon be hungry. Once I go and urinate once, that is all. I will feel hungry again, because there is not, it's just starch. So we need this as much as, you know, Nigerians take Quaker oats or oatmeal, for example, for breakfast, as breakfast cereal. What makes it difficult for us to take whole grain pap? It's beautiful to take, you know.
Made the same way as...
You just steep your grains in water, wash thoroughly, have them ground smoothly, and that's all. Come and keep scooping and making your pap. So beautiful and tasty.
How should a typically healthy day start? Now, is it with water? Is it fruits? What about the timing? And then, is there a place for fasting? If you want to do intermittent fasting, 16/8, or other variants of it, or 1/7 per week, 2/7, what works?
And virtually, you know, everything that, you know, has to do with the issue of healthy living will work. Because all these things you are counting are components of the healthy living program. You understand? Waking first in the morning and having, you know, water at room temperature, even if it is just a long glass full, or if you can finish, you know, the small bottle, it is good for you. Others, you know, may choose to have, you know, warm water with a dash of lemon in it as first thing in the morning, which is also very important because it helps to open up, you know, the veins and help the circulation and all that. And then, of course, when we talk about breakfast, it should be light breakfast, light, balanced breakfast. But these days, you find that people, you're laughing, people wake up, you know, when you want to take diet history, sometimes you wonder how Nigerians eat. We are talking about, you know, how expensive the diet is, but somebody wakes up in the morning, he eats eba. He eats rice. That is the breakfast some people understand. But we're talking about, how about bringing in, you know, something that is so light, bringing a little bit of milk into it, because milk is part of your food guide pyramid. You need milk in your diet. Then you also should be able to look at the issue of, you know, the choices you make with regards to whether you want to do a 16/8 plan, or you want to do, you know, what else did you call that? 7.5, or 1/7, or something like that.
Weekly now.
A 16/8
is, you know,
we propagate, yes, we propagate 16/8 plan very widely now. Why? Because it kind of returns you, it realigns you with your circadian rhythm. It brings you back to this biological clock we are talking about. What do we mean? That you're fasting 16 hours, beginning from 6 p.m. to say 10 a.m.
Or 7 to 11?
Yes. No, just, you know, for some that are on medication, we usually will say if you can break at 8 to have your medication, do. You understand? There are no hard and fast rules on this. But the fact is that you should be able to have because you're going to be eating only 2 meals in a day. So your meals will be essentially balanced. Balanced breakfast with vegetables, with everything that we mentioned, and their fruits. And then you will eat your lunch at least, you know, latest by 3 p.m. And even after that, you still have a 3-hour window of eating, but no longer a meal. But you could graze on, you know, nibble on fruits between 3 and 6. Once it is 6, close eating, you can drink water. And then your fast begins again. And before you know what is happening, people, you know, begin to lose weight. Just gradually. And certain diseases begin to also recede. They begin to disappear. And you find that the person is a lot healthier. Of course, you have to also couple that with exercise. Exercise is a very, you know, cardinal point in terms of, you know, healthy living.
Healthy.
So you can't do that.
What about the weekly? If you have to do a whole day's fasting, if you opt for that, how healthy?
Well,
A
it
day or
is. It
two
is
in a
also
week.
good. He will talk about that. He will talk about that. But you know, we've always said if there is medication in the process, try to, you know, give
All right.
consideration
Many
to
thanks.
that.
Many thanks, madam. Doctor, we need to begin to round up the conversation now. What can we do? I have a question here that talks about what we should not eat to avoid diabetes. So speak about how we can prevent diabetes.
Okay, thank you very much. Prevention for diabetes is multifaceted in different approaches. When we see patients, for instance, in the hospital, we profile their risk for diabetes. You ask them questions. You look at their family history. Do they have family history of diabetes? And their lifestyle. You also look at their medications. So if medications are there that can predispose them to diabetes, you will want to probably, if their sugar is going high, you want to alter that. And then their lifestyle. We've been talking about it almost throughout this program, even from the video clip that we watched, the essence and importance of healthy living and diet and lifestyle. And I must re-emphasize what she has emphasized. These things are available. Even somebody was asking in the rural community, how can they? We got to do some work in the villages, and you find out that you go there, you won't see any bottle of processed drink in any shop. Somebody was looking for one to buy, you won't see. But you see all their houses, they are cultivating vegetables, and they have them around. So we just need to re-emphasize and let people know the importance of these things. And then for those who are at risk, when we profile them, we see maybe they are overweight. We now advise them on how to lose weight, gain good optimal weight, and their eating habit, advise them on what to eat. Also, we look at their probably risk. You ask them whether they have father, mothers, first-degree relatives who have diabetes, and you give them appropriate advice. The time may not be there to talk about everything, but like I said, you can share their contact as far. How
often should we screen?
Well, for women who are pregnant, they should be screened at any time they become pregnant, and after about 2 to 3 years, because for gestational diabetes, later it increases their risk for developing type 2 diabetes. Then for those who have above 35, irrespective of whether it's a man or woman, we should be able to be screened annually. Like you mentioned earlier, there are issues of misdiagnosis. I won't say misdiagnosis, but some of these tests, there's no test that is 100% perfect, that it can pick everything. So sometimes you need to follow up these people and to check them regularly. Because we may not have sufficient time to discuss about that, the DAN is organizing her symposium, Diabetes Association of Nigeria, on the 20th of November at Bolingo Hotel. So people who want to get more information, can come in to participate.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Priya, I'm thinking, is there a way that workplaces can support persons who have diabetes? Of course, that's if they declare.
Who declares?
Well, so I think it's great. It's a great question because this year's theme is diabetes and the workplace. So there's a lot of conversations around that. So for people living with diabetes, those who actually have diabetes, you might have some organizations. Of course, you want to ensure confidentiality. You want to make sure that the person who's living with diabetes feels safe in the work environment. I think generally what workplaces can do, not just for those with diabetes, but just even to prevent diabetes as a whole, create healthy workspaces. For example, some organizations can create, fitness days, encourage people to go out. Another important thing, which we've emphasized here, is information. Providing, your employees with the right information, education, and communicating that to them effectively. So, ensure that they have access to materials, to resources, and you encourage that within the workplace. And
because of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Final words, 30 seconds, just 30 seconds.
Making the workplace, convenient for people to live healthy lives. These policies are very important from organizations. In some organizations, you don't bring in fizzy drinks and all those snacks into the place. If you will eat them, get them from outside. You understand? So that is a good orientation for the
All right, many thanks.
people.
Many thanks. Sarah Abagai, registered dietitian, author, and fellow of the Institute for Dietetics in Nigeria. Many thanks for sharing your insight with us again. Always a pleasure to have you, of course. And we appreciate Priya Ruth Sigali, Manager, Diabetes Awareness and Care Project Health Strategy and Delivery Foundation. Thank you, and continue the good work. Dr. Mansoor Ramalan, consultant physician, endocrinologist, and diabetologist, the first vice president, Diabetes Association of Nigeria, and chairman, Non-Communicable Disease Committee, Nigerian Medical Association. It was indeed great to have you. Thank you for being a part of our conversation, and we look forward to having you some other time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so try to eat light this weekend, whatever that means. I'm Henry John, live locked on the NTA.
All right, and try to help your neighbor who can't help himself. I'm Victor as well. See you again on Monday.